There'll be a short break, just a comfort break. Don't go away and make a sandwich or anything. And then we'll come back for a talk by Chris Corrigan to say how the Trust is doing at the moment, and then a good long talk by David Plummer on photography, which will be fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. We have some proxy votes and some people who've sent in questions in advance. There will be a time for questions and answers, I think after about item 5, something like that, when we can answer questions in relation to the accounts and the trustees' report. Yes, we'll get round to questions. Now, if we don't get round to all the questions, I'll try to make it as flexible as possible. If we don't get round to all the questions, we'll try to address any questions that aren't addressed, either online or on the website or later. Great. To make sure the meeting runs smoothly, we've actually already got proposers and seconders for all the resolutions that we're going to be having. So that'll make it run smoother, and we'll just be asking for people to say yes or no to each of the resolutions. Proxy votes have been received, and they'll be taken into account as well. So that's it. About an hour for the AGM. Short break. Back to listen to Chris Corrigan, and then we'll listen to David Plummer as well. So that's how it should pan out for the day. Excellent. What else? What have I forgotten? What have I forgotten so far, Maria? Is that all okay? I'm okay at the moment. Thank you very much. Before we get going, I was just thinking back. The last time we met as a physical AGM was probably 3 years ago. And only 3 years. But how much has changed in just that 3 years? And I was just thinking, well, what indicators have we got for how things have changed? And I thought back to the reports that are done by the Worldwide Fund for Nature every now and then. Back in 2018, I nearly said 1918. Back in 2018, WWF produced a report that said that animal populations since 1970 have reduced 68%, which is staggering. But I also remember going on radio and talking to people about this, and it wasn't really getting any kind of grasp. It was just a kind of funny statistic that you nature lovers might be worried about, but it wasn't that important. This year, a few weeks ago, WWF produced another report when they said it had gone down to 69%. Only 1% difference. But I noticed this was all over the news. It was all over the social media. People were really starting to grasp, actually, this is important. So it's not the statistic I was thinking about. It's actually, that strikes me as a sign that people are actually waking up to an ecological crisis. It seems to me that nature conservation is being mainstreamed. The government has now got an environment bill with targets to end nature loss by 2030. Now that sounds great, but every government I've ever known has always said they're going to end biodiversity loss in 10 years' time. Hopefully it's different this time. We are now in the United Nations decade on ecosystem restoration. So globally and nationally, things should be happening. Locally, loads is being done. The Wildlife Trust is involved with lots of local authorities talking about local nature recovery strategies. There are published nature recovery maps now. So it's starting to get serious. Even more so, landowners themselves are starting to join up to make their own ecological networks. You may have heard about the Wheel to the Waves project, trying to link up sites all through the countryside. So I hope this time it's different. I hope we have mainstreamed nature conservation, and we are going to turn the corner and see things actually get better, not just stop them getting worse. And time is of the essence. As Sir David King, who used to be one of the government's chief scientists, he said recently, what happens in the next 5 to 10 years is going to determine the future of humanity. No pressure there then, Sussex Wildlife Trust. So on that basis, on that background, we've got a lot to do, a lot to live up to. We have targets that we need to meet, and the Wildlife Trustees are right in the middle of this, doing lots of things locally with all your support, obviously. So what I'd like to do is get going with the AGM. Let's open the 60th AGM proper. Now, the first thing I need to do is to introduce the first item, which is about the approval of the last minutes. Some of you were probably there. The last AGM was online, so you'll have seen it there. We took some minutes. I think you will have all seen copies of the minutes. There were spare ones on the way in, and first job is to actually approve those minutes. Now we have a proposer, it's Martin Kent, and a seconder is Simon Linnington. And can I have hands in favour of receiving the minutes? Excellent. Anybody against? Excellent. One thing I've forgotten, I've been told straight away, is I forgot to point out the apologies. So we've had a certain number of apologies. In particular, We've had 4 apologies, 2 of them from 2 of our trustees who couldn't make it because they had other already arranged commitments. So sorry about that, so I forgot the apologies. Right, okay, so that's approved the minutes of the last time. We're already moving quite well through the agenda. What I'd like to do now is introduce the next item, which is the presentation of the Chair's report. So it's the presentation of the report by Nick Pashrika, Chair of Council. Can I hand over to you, Nick?
Thank you, Tony. You need to be fit to be up here. Getting off is the challenge. Getting on is easy. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's great to see so many of you here. And I understand we have, 35, 36 people online, so welcome to you as well. What I'd like to do today is reflect a little bit on the importance of membership and our members to the Sussex Wildlife Trust. Then I'll talk a bit about some of our achievements of the year, and then I'll thank the people that have made all those achievements possible. So starting with the membership, and I'm a member like you. The annual members meeting is an excellent reminder that the Trust is legally a member constituted organisation. The members approved the original constitution, the original rules. The members approved all the changes that have taken place over the last 60 years. And while we are regulated by the Charity Commission, at the end of the day, we're accountable to you, our members, for everything that we do. The members provide over a third of our income. Actually, if you count legacies, which come mostly from members, if you count legacies, it's about 50% of our income. Left us after 4 years in post. She made a big contribution while she was with us, and we do wish her well in everything she wants to do going forward. But clearly, a chief executive's departure always creates a little bit of uncertainty. However, our staff and our management team basically kept on with their jobs, and I'm really grateful to them for their commitment and their focus on what they were doing. Fortunately, we were able to recruit Chris Corrigan as our interim chief exec, so that minimized the disruption. Chris is an experienced leader. He's a respected conservationist. He knows us well because he's lived in Sussex most of his life, and he was with RSPB. So he's a great addition to the team. I know the staff team have welcomed him, and I sense a really positive atmosphere within the organisation, which is all excellent. Our volunteers, and I guess several of you are volunteers, are an essential part of our capability in terms of what we do. We really couldn't manage without them. And I'm delighted that many of the restrictions we had to place on volunteering during COVID are now gone, so people are back doing what they love to do. We have around 700 volunteers who help us look after reserves, get involved in some of our engagement activities, and get involved in lots of other ways. And as I said, those 700 volunteers are absolutely essential to what our 120 staff do. Without them, we couldn't do half of what we do. So what have these staff and volunteers been doing over the year? Well, the details are all in the annual report, so I'm not going to go through all of that. I just want to highlight a couple of things to give you a flavour. We look after over 30 reserves around Sussex, covering around 2,000 hectares. And our volunteers and our staff have been coppicing, repairing fences, repairing ditches, arranging grazing, and doing all the other myriad of things that are required to keep the reserves in reasonable, good shape, so that wildlife can flourish and wildlife can be restored and flourish in those reserves. At our reserve in Rye Harbour, we opened the Rye Harbour Discovery Centre in May last year. If you haven't been, go. It is an absolutely wonderful facility, something we're really, really proud of. And we are using the facility to run a number of programs which enable people of all ages to engage with nature at Rye Harbour, which was a wonderful reserve even before the Discovery Centre came along, but now it really is a very special place. Elsewhere, after all the COVID restrictions, our communities and engagement team are back putting on various programs for children, for adults, And there, all these programs are, always very popular, and there's always great demand. So it's nice to be back doing all that work. We're partnering with a number of organizations around Sussex to deliver various projects around the county. A notable one being the Sussex Kelp Restoration Partnership, which seeks to restore almost 200 square miles of kelp forest around our shores. So that's a very important and long-term project. We also are proud of the Sussex Biodiversity Record Centre, which we host as a wildlife trust, but actually is run on behalf of a whole variety of organizations, government agencies, local authorities, conservation organizations, and so on. So it really is a significant resource for Sussex, and we're delighted and proud to be the hosts of it. All this is great progress, and that's just some of the things that are in the annual report. But it's very easy to slip back. And when I wrote my report for the annual accounts, which was back in late spring, I lauded the Environment Act, which in many ways is groundbreaking environmental legislation. But only a couple of months after I wrote the report, the government announced that it had the intention of rolling back a whole raft of environmental protections that have been built up over the years. So thank you very much for all of those that have taken part in our Defending Nature campaign. And I know I saw some of you filling out the card outside, so thank you for that. As you know, that whole area as to exactly what the government's going to do in the environmental area is all up in flux right now. Maybe we'll find out some more next week. But obviously, it remains important to keep up the pressure. So those of you that have not yet signed those cards and taken part in the campaign, please do so. So those are just some of the things we've been doing. It's all only possible because the support we get from you, our members, from our volunteers, and from our staff. And I want to thank each and every one of you. To our members, thank you for your continuing and indeed increasing support. Your financial contribution, your membership, is basically the financial foundation of this whole trust. That's what everything is built on. So thank you for providing that and maintaining it year by year. To our volunteers, and in the volunteers I include our trustees, thank you very much for giving so much of your time freely. And finally, to our staff, thank you very much for your commitment over the year, and thank you very much for the work that you do. So just to conclude, with the support of our 39,000 members, our 120 staff, and our 700 volunteers are working across Sussex to help wildlife. Together, we all are really making a difference. Thank you. Shall I just carry on? Carry on. Right. Okay. Tony's in charge. I just do what I'm told. Now, the next session. Do I do something with this? The next session should be presented by our treasurer, Mark Braithwaite. But Mark is away. And then I thought, well, if he can't do it, perhaps our ex-treasurer, who's still a trustee, Linda Clark, could do it, but she's away too. So I am third best. Now, fortunately, Mark did supervise the slides I'm going to present, so hopefully I won't mess it up too much. And Simon, our finance director, is in the audience, so if you ask me too many different questions, I'll manage somehow. Here we go. Let's start with just a big overview of the numbers. So the big story for me is our membership went up from 35,685 to 39,000. We are the fourth highest membership of any wildlife trust in the country. And as I said before, it's something to be really proud of and something that frankly sustains us going forward. So looking at what we did in the year financially, our income, on the face of it, went down by a lot, from just over 7 million to 5.3 million. That's not that's a bit misleading because, frankly, last year we were raising money for Rye Harbour Reserve, and so there are big legacies and big income drives last year, which boosted that number. And similarly, last year, all the furlough money that we got wasn't income as well. So if you take aside those sort of slightly one-off things, actually the underlying income growth is pretty strong, and our membership income actually went up, not down. So that number, the 5.3 is a good number. Expenditure went up by just over £1 million. Some of that, or quite a lot of that actually, is because we recommenced face-to-face recruitment, which we had paused during COVID. And face-to-face recruitment costs us a lot of money up front, but it pays back within a couple of years. So, yes, there's a cost this year, but frankly, by next year, we'll have got the money back. And it does provide the long-term foundation for the organisation. Also, in expenditure, we've got Rye Harbour is now operating as a discovery centre, so the cafe and the shop and all that sort of stuff, cost is in there as well. So take all that together, and while last year we had a 2.7 million surplus, which went to finance Rye Harbour, we don't have any such project like that this year. So we had a small deficit of £174,000, and actually that is all due to accounting depreciation. If you look at the cash impact, we pretty much broke even on a cash basis, which is a really, really good achievement over the year. So just a little bit more detail on those things. That's the membership trend over the years, last, 10 years or so. That's something to be really proud of. It is amazing how successful we have been. And, we have an incredible membership team that do a remarkable job. And we have loyal members and very successful member recruitment, so numbers go up. Yeah, we lose a few every year. But as you can see, the trend is up and up and up. Now, I have to say, this year, because of the economic environment, it's proving quite a lot harder. We've got a way to go yet, but I don't think we're going to get that growth again. But that's okay. We are defending a very high base of membership, so a little bit of reduction in that is not going to be disastrous. But our membership is something to be really, really proud of, and thank you very much for that at all. And the membership, of course, you all pay us your annual membership fee, and we get a lot of, oops, that's not the right one. We get a lot of legacies. And as you can see, the big bars that are higher than anything else, that's basically Rye Harbour money. So if you look below the Rye Harbour money and look at the base level of legacies, it's a slowly growing number. Legacies are really, really important to us. I'll show you the total number in a minute. And thank you very much for those of you that have already included us in your legacy. I understand we know of, was it 150 you said, Caroline? People that have told us that they put us in their legacy. For those of you that haven't, please do consider it. Our membership team is very good at supporting you to figure out how that can be done, and every little £100 counts. So thank you very much for that. So looking at income, and I'll go back one, I guess. Yeah. So there's our membership income, 36%, big number. Legacy is 15%, so altogether, I think from members, as I said, we get more than 50%, which is great. The trading income at the top is the Rye Harbour cafe, shop, etc. Mostly. We get a few donations, and I'll talk a little bit in a minute about what the charitable activities are. So that's where our money comes from. So as you can see, our membership is absolutely fundamental to our income stream. Legacy. So that's the charitable activity income. That is altogether £1.9 million, and it basically is people giving us money specifically for the various things that we do. So nature reserves, that's grants and stewardship income for looking after all our different reserves. People and wildlife, that's the income from events, courses, schools, the grants we get from various local authorities for working with people in the community and so on. Wildlife conservation is the grants we get for the different projects that team undertakes. And then the data collection, obviously, is the Sussex Biodiversity Records Centre. So that's the spread of income and how we, if you like, spend, how we raise the money for these activities. Moving on, how do we spend the money? That's about £5.5 million being spent. The biggest one is raising money, which is roughly a third, just below a third. That number is a little higher than usual because, as I said, we recommence the face-to-face recruitment activity, which is pretty expensive up front, but it does pay for itself within a couple of years. And also within the raising funds number are the operating costs of Rye Harbour, which of course wasn't there previously. So yeah, but I mean our fundraising team does a remarkable job and pays for itself many times over. The other ones are fairly self-explanatory in terms of what they mean, so I won't read them out. And that's our income and expenditure, and if I look at what all that ends up with, at the end of the year, the third line along, we had almost 13,887,000 of funds. What is the number in 60 years ago? £25. Right you go. £25 has grown to £13 million, £14 million. We've done well. What a wonderful bank account. It's down a bit because of the slight deficit we had on depreciation, but yeah, that's a good solid number. Having said that, that is not all sitting in the bank or under the mattress. Most of that money is tied up in our reserves, and indeed, Rye Harbour Discovery Centre costs us just over £5 million. So that's a big chunk of money sitting there. Also, in that £14 million is money people give us for, if you like, specific things that they want to do, restricted money. So, for example, we were given, it's sitting in there, the £1 million we were given to purchase and look after Sussex chalk downlands. Sitting in there is £900,000 we were given to buy woodlands. So those sort of things which can only be used for that purpose. Okay, we can't spend it in other things. Some of the money is also obviously committed in terms of various projects that were ongoing. In fact, if you take aside the assets, reserve assets, the money that can only be used for a specific purpose, and money that is already committed, what is left, if you like, is the free reserve that we can spend, as we see fit, which is our reserve, if you like. That comes down to £1,870,000, which is a good number. Okay, which is a good number. It's a solid number. It says that we are in a good financial position. We are pretty secure. Having said that, we do spend £5 million a year. So if we had to live off the 1,870, that wouldn't last very long. Okay, so while our 1,870 is a good level of reserve, frankly, our real reserve is our membership. And if the membership stopped supporting us, we'd go bust pretty quickly. So while I'm proud of the 1,870, I'm prouder of our membership. And thank you very much for your support. That has given us this solid financial position. That's about all I think I want to say. So we'll take questions. Careful.
I knew I'd do that at some stage. Great. So that's the Chairman's report, the Trustee's report, and also the financial report. Now's your opportunity to ask questions in relation to those two things. We may have another opportunity later on after Chris has talked for more general things on the Wildlife Trust. But before we adopt the Chairman's report and the accounts, we'd like to answer or try to answer any questions you'd like to bring up. So this is your opportunity. We've allowed a certain amount of time. If we find there's detailed questions we can't answer here, we'll take them away and look at them. We have other trustees and members of staff dotted around the audience. If you ask something that we need to pass on to them, we can do that. So please, now is your chance. Do you want to ask us any questions?
Hello. Is it on?
Yes.
What's the anticipated revenue from the Rye Harbour Discovery Centre per annum?
Maria, could you help with that?
Is it on now? Yeah.
Maria is our, what's your title, Maria?
I'm the operations director, so the Discovery Centre comes under my remit. It's a good question. We haven't had a year of operating normally yet. We opened during COVID, and we had our first year was good. We nearly broke even. Our second year is not looking quite so good, but we're hoping to break even or thereabouts. The thing with the Discovery Centre is that most of it is there for us to carry out our charitable activities. It's not primarily a revenue-making exercise, if you like. So the things that we do, so at the moment we've got an externally funded project funded by the Heritage Lottery taking place, so a lot of the activities that go on there are free for people to come and attend, so we're not, that side of what we do is not intended necessarily for making money. So we'll be happy, I think, if it doesn't cost us anything, and because what it does, if the cafe and shop can pay for the activities that we put on there, then we'll be very happy with that.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Other questions? We have to wait for the microphone to go to you as well, because otherwise the people who are live streamed won't be able to hear. So thank you.
I couldn't see on your balance sheets where salaries appeared.
Where, what appeared, sorry?
Salary, because you say you have 120 staff, but I didn't see where their salaries appeared on the sheets.
The salaries were in the costs that we showed you earlier, the 5-point-something million. So the salaries are allocated to, you know, whether they are on conservation work or fundraising work. So they are in, if I may quickly show you that, they're in that, but they're spread around all the activities. So we show the salaries by activity, if you like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other questions? If you think of more, we can always pick them up outside of this meeting, or general things Chris might be able to pick up. Oh, sorry.
Can I just say one, sorry, while you're in, if you want more details on salaries, it is in the accounts. I think there is a note there with all the salaries in it.
It's on page 25.
On page 25, thank you.
Could you clarify, please, the difference on the pie chart between, I'm trying to remember now, nature conservation and the reserve management?
Right.
How that...
Henry, I think. Henry, where are you? Introduce yourself, Henry, as to who you are.
Hi, I'm Henry Brockbank, so I'm the Director for Conservation Policy and Evidence. So the funding allocated to nature reserve management is literally, for the 30-plus nature reserves, the costs in managing those sites, the staff, the grazing, all of that process. Whereas the nature conservation part of the pie chart, that's allocated to all our projects, like the work on the Sussex kelp recovery and projects like Wilder Horsham District and our Wilder Landscapes work, Sussex Flow Initiative. So we've got a whole raft of projects working in the wider countryside. So you could see it as on our nature reserves and off our nature reserves.
Just to add to that as well, that also includes a lot of the advocacy work that Henry does in her team, which is the really important work behind the scenes, trying to lobby for change with all sorts of different partners. So that's where that's...
So, for example, the Defend Nature campaign work and all of the work we do with local authorities and responding to local plans, etc., that's all in there as well.
Good. Are we okay? Shall we move on? You've got my notes there. I think now what we need to do is just, thanks very much, see where we've got to. So we have the Chair's report and we have the accounts to approve. First of all, let's take the, where are we? It's always on 2 pages, isn't it? Let's take the accounts first. To approve the accounts as you've seen them now and as has been written in the annual report. We have a proposer, Linda Clark. We also have a seconder, Martin Kent. And can we have hands in favour of accepting the accounts, please? Oh, that looks good. Anybody against? And no abstentions? Excellent. Thank you very much. And secondly, can we pass the report to council that you heard Nick talk about earlier. So it's the report to council. We have a proposer, which is Maria Johnson, and we have a seconder, Alan Stewart. Can I have hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Excellent. Okay, let's move on. Now we need to get on with some electing of posts of trustees within the Wildlife Trust. Information about trustees is on our website, and is also, I think, been shared on the AGM notice. We have one new person put forward as a trustee, who's already been co-opted, so he's already there. We know him very well. His name is Mark Braithwaite. I think he's going to help mainly in the finance area, so that's really helpful. So he's been proposed by Linda Clark and seconded by Nick Pashrika, a new trustee for the Sussex Wildlife Trust. I think it's the only new trustee for this year. So can I have a show of hands in favour of accepting Mark Braithwaite as a new trustee? Everybody happy? Anybody against? Abstentions? Passed. Thank you very much. We now have, you probably know that with our trustees, they have a 3-year period, and they can sit for three-year periods. But it means after each 3-year period, if they want to stand again, they have to be re-elected. So we have 3 people who are due for re-election this time, and they are quite key people: Martin Kent, Simon Lennington, and Nick Pashrika. So what I want to do is take each one after the other and ask you to accept them as for re-election. So first of all, Martin Kent. He's been proposed by Henry Brocklebank and seconded by Nick Pashrika. Can I have hands in favour of re-electing Martin Kent? Thank you very much. Anybody against? And abstentions? Excellent, that's good. Moving on. The next person on my list is Simon Lennington. He's been with us quite a long time, haven't you, Simon? So I'm glad you put your name forward again. Thank you. Simon Lennington has been with us. He's done a lot of work in the Conservation Department, for example. He's been proposed by Bob Foreman and seconded by Richard Black. Can I have hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. Anybody against? And any abstentions? Great, that's fine. And finally, Nick Pashrika, our chairman, has been looking after the trust for a while now, and it's been fantastic, so thank you to Nick. Proposer is Jess Price, been seconded by Martin Kent. Can I have votes in favour, please? Excellent. Anybody against? No, I think that's great. They are the 3 people I had to re-elect, so I think we're on track, aren't we? I think that's... Have I forgotten anything, looking at my brains at the front? No? Okay, moving on. Yeah. Yes, there'll be no other candidates putting themselves forward, so that's just the ones we've had. Now what we need to do is appoint our auditors and get you to agree to pay for them, which is something we have to do every year. And what I have to ask you to do now is to authorise the Council of Management to appoint the auditors and to fix their remuneration. So first of all, can I ask you to delegate the Council of Management to appoint the auditors? This has been proposed by Martin Kent and seconded by Claire Blanco. So those in favour of us getting some auditors? Thank you very much. Anybody against? Fantastic. And secondly, can we pay them, please? So to authorise the Council of Management to fix the remuneration for the auditors, proposed by Linda Clark and seconded by Maria Johnson. Those in favour, please? Anybody against? The auditors will be very pleased. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. That's all gone swimmingly, I think. Have I forgotten anything? I usually forget something.
No, that's all.
She's looking shocked. I haven't forgotten anything. I think we're there. I think that is the AGM. We like to kind of get through this as well as we can. Some interesting information there from Nick. Thank you very much. But I think that is the end of the formal AGM. We're in good time. What I'd like to do now is take... How long have we got down here? Quarter to 12. That's quite a long time. We could probably start again at past. Okay. Okay, decent break. Yes, you've earned a decent break because you were so quick with all the voting there. Thank you very much. I suggest we now have a decent break where you can go to, comfort breaks and so on, and we come back here at 11:45, where we're going to hear a talk from Chris Corrigan about where we are with the Wildlife Trust, and then a talk by David Plummer on photography. So please go and chat amongst yourself. Also, it's an opportunity if you see trustees and members of staff, if you want to ask about anything that's going on, if you want to ask about anything going on, please talk to the staff and trustees. And also, we have merchandise for sale. We don't want to take any of it back in, so please buy it all. Is that okay? See you again at 11:45. Thank you very much.
You're obviously chairing this meeting, but what is your role in the trust? Right, okay. I've got your name to be pressed, isn't it? Right. That's after a long stint as chief executive, so that's quite reasonable. I don't know, really. I can't remember when. I've not been creative. I don't know if it's not been able to. What is the logo of the Wildlife Trust? I've never thought of it. Now I can see it. Now I can see it very well. I see it so often and I've never taken a glance to right here. It's a reflection of the interesting debate machine, which is now a friend of mine who had it about a year or so ago. It was interesting that he said actually it's regularly online and talking about it. And then he said he was joined the field at the time, and I kept saying he was so busy enjoying it. And I kept saying say yes,
Introduce Chris Corrigan, who's probably known to a lot of you anyway. He's been in the area since, I think, 1990. I've known him most of that time. Used to work for RSPB. First time I met him, he was based just down the road from here. So, Chris, very warm welcome to Chris Corrigan, who's looking after the Wildlife Trust as Interim Chief Executive at the moment. Over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony, and good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming along, and thank you to all those people who are joining online as well. So my job today, I've only been here 2 minutes, so it's quite a challenging job. I've got 10 minutes to run through some of the achievements of the Trust during the last financial year, but I'm also going to sprinkle it with a few updates and latest news of things that are happening and things that are relevant and hopefully will be of interest to you. But before I start, I hope you noticed when Tony was running through the agenda right at the start, he mentioned me and then moved on. And then he talked about David. And he said David's talk would be fantastic. And he was really looking forward to hearing it. But he didn't say anything about my talk. So anyway, the good thing about that is that the bar is low. So manage your expectations, please. So first off, so as Tony said, I've been in Sussex for a long time, but I've never worked for the Trust, of course, but I've worked with the Trust for many years. And actually, for me, this is a brilliant opportunity, and I am so privileged to join and lead this organisation, because already in the short time I've been here, the dedication and commitment and passion of the staff, the trustees, the volunteers and the supporters is brilliant. And it is really lovely to be part of the organisation. And it's fair to say that so far every day's been a treat, and I am learning so much from colleagues in the organisation. So I'm looking forward to carrying on working with them and also hearing more from you on your thoughts as members. So first off, I thought I'd start with our nature reserves. I'm sure many of you know our nature reserves, 32 nature reserves, almost 2,000 hectares of Sussex. And these are some of the most special places for wildlife in the county. Old Lodge is perhaps one of the better known ones. So I was at Old Lodge last week, actually. And there's always things to see on these reserves. So Old Lodge now, thanks to the management, but also some changes in climate, it's now saturated with Dartford warblers, is how our volunteer warden describes the place. Saturated with Dartford warblers. But of course, you've also got good numbers of woodlarks and nightjars, hobbies bred this year, and glowworms were recorded for the first time in 29 years. And that's a really good indication of the sort of flourishing wildlife that occurs on our nature reserves. And again, that is all down to the support of our membership. Really special places. Now, this wildlife doesn't appear on our nature reserves by magic. There's a lot of hard work by our staff, by our volunteers, to manage the habitat, to get the conditions just right. But actually, it's more than just the practical management. The organisation actually manages, we've got a very professional team who manage livestock, so we have sheep, cattle, Exmoor ponies, and we use these animals to graze our sites to create the perfect conditions for things like orchids and butterflies. And grazing is the management tool which does this best of all, but it requires a lot of work. But the operations has had a lot of investment, and we've got some great people looking after it. So when you see the animals on the sites, that's what they're doing. They are part of the team managing our reserves for wildlife. But of course, Nick mentioned the big highlight in May 21, which was opening the Rye Harbour Discovery Centre. It's been an ambition for many years. It's a really challenging project to build a visitor centre like this, so the Trust can be really proud of the achievement. And it's a wonderful place if you've ever been there. If you haven't, do go. And it gives us a chance to welcome and talk to more of the 400,000 visitors a year who come to Rye Harbour, a really tremendous asset for the organisation. But of course, nature reserves, we can't save nature by buying land. We can't buy our way out of the nature conservation crisis. We have to do work off our reserves, and that's not just on the land, that's on the sea as well. And I think one of the most amazing projects that the Trust has been part of has been the Help Our Kelp campaign, and then the bylaw that came in on the back of that, which protected 300 square kilometres of seabed, and that will allow the restoration of a marine ecosystem at a huge scale. And it is an amazing, and even before I even knew I was coming to the Trust, the webinar was one of the real personal highlights for me. And if I'd still been at RSPB, I would have been insanely jealous of the achievement of the Wildlife Trust. So well done to everybody who was involved with that. But it's not just at sea, of course. We also work on land, trying to restore nature at a landscape scale. So to connect sites, to make sites bigger and better. And to do this, we work with landowners, and we've a series of projects that we do this. If I looked at one example, Wilder Horsham, so there we're working in partnership with the District Council. We've so far worked with over 70 landowners to try and make that area better for wildlife, bigger, better and more joined up. But as well as working directly on the land, we also do the campaigning and policy work, which Henry talked about in answer to the question. And this involves defending important sites from damaging planning applications. So you'll be aware of the Centre Parks proposal, for example, is one that Henry's team is working on. But we're also working as part of the national team with some of the bigger national campaigns, of which Defend Nature is one. So as Nick was saying, if you haven't filled out a postcard, please do. And I would like to say a big thank you to the 1,100 people who've so far signed postcards in support of the campaign, which is really fantastic. But of course, actually doing the nature conservation, whether it's on our sites or off our site, is only half the battle. The other half the battle is to connect and inspire more people about wildlife. So as the team know, one of my big concerns is that over the years, people, especially children, have got more and more disconnected from nature. So I'm sure many of you will recognise this in terms of how you enjoyed wildlife, how you engage with wildlife as a child is very different to how young people and children operate today. So we've got a really big job to connect people with nature at scale. And it is a big challenge, but we have to do it, because if people haven't had the chance to experience nature or understand nature, how on earth can we expect them to care about it? So that twin track approach of doing the conservation and inspiring people about nature is how we will win in the end. But of course, we've talked about our volunteers. So some of Sussex residents, and of course our volunteers are perhaps the pinnacle of that, are incredibly well connected, knowledgeable and dedicated about nature. And what we have to remember is an organisation is we are a volunteer organisation. We have got 6 times as many volunteers as we have members of staff. The people who run the organisation, the most important people in the organisation, are volunteers, the trustees. And as staff members, we need to remind ourselves that that is what we are. And if we did not have the fantastic support that we get from volunteers, we wouldn't be able to achieve anything like the amount that we can. So a big thank you to all of you who are volunteers. But of course, we need to reach out beyond just our core membership and our volunteers. And we do this with projects such as Wild Coast Sussex, which is lottery funded project. And there we're reaching out into coastal communities to engage and inspire more people about their local environment. And an important part of that work is, to date, we've already engaged and worked with 800 children along the Sussex coast, which is just the sort of thing we need doing. But this project is brilliant because it combines that connection with also making a difference. So as part of the beach cleans, they've collected 12.5 tonnes of ghost nets. So ghost nets are the damaged, broken and discarded fishing nets which just float around at sea and then end up on the beaches. Now that is a litter problem, and it does make our beaches look messy, but it's more than just a litter problem, because of course these floating nets, these ghost nets, tangle and drown things like seals, porpoises, dolphins and seabirds. So it is a real ecological problem as well as a litter problem. So getting on top of this and actually sending these things for recycling is a really good thing. And in a beautiful irony, a lot of this marine plastic, which is where the fishing nets end up, can be recycled as litter pickers, which I think is a lovely solution and a lovely example of how to solve an environmental problem and at the same time produce something good. But of course the ultimate one is where actually we don't need litter pickers because there's no litter anymore. Okay, so that is a really quick canter through the work that we do. There's loads of things that I haven't even learned yet about the organisation. I learn new things every day. I learned something even today. So I haven't mentioned the Biodiversity Records Centre, but this morning I learned that we store and manage 10 million records of different taxa in Sussex. 10 million records, that is phenomenal, and that provides the evidence base for much of our conservation. So there are many, many more things that we do which I haven't talked about, so please do talk. We've got lots of members of staff. Please do talk to the members of staff, ask them about their work, ask me about our work, and particularly ask the staff members about all those really good things that I should have talked about and haven't. And of course, Nick talked about our membership, brilliant membership. I've worked with membership before. I led a face-to-face operation while I was at RSPB. The operation that we've got here is absolutely first class, which is a credit to Debbie and the team who work on that. We can do more, but I'm sure we can do more, but it is absolutely first class. However, we have got these economic headwinds, as Nick mentioned. So one thing you can do is, if you can recruit your friends, family, neighbours, people you pass in the street, give them, that will be really fantastic. It is a way you can add value to the work of the Trust. So finally, I think if I was going to leave you with one message, it would be thank you. A huge thank you to you, all our supporters, all our members, because without our membership, we wouldn't be able to do all the things that we have to. The challenge is big. The challenge facing biodiversity and that disconnection from nature and climate, these are really huge challenges. They might seem impossible, but that is our job. Our job is to make the impossible possible and tackle these challenges at a local Sussex scale. And with your help, I think we can show that there are solutions. We know what to do. We can make a difference in the county, and that can start to give people hope. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks very much, Chris. In spite of what I said earlier, he's quite good, really, isn't he? Any questions about the Trust, anything, things you've heard in general, about what the work we're doing, some of the things you've heard today, or some thoughts you've had in advance? And if you wait for the microphone to come, the question's just there.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. I'm curious about the sheep. I've been listening to George Monbiot recently, and he says that in Scotland and in Wales, the sheep have absolutely decimated the natural landscapes. So I suppose my question is it because these sheep are used as a tool for grazing rather than farmed sheep for profit that they're allowed in Sussex?
No, that is a really good question. And it'd be great to have a conversation about that afterwards. But in summary, so I'm from the north, so I've seen some of these absolutely sheep grazed, decimated landscapes where there's less grass than there is on a bowling green. So the key is, in those places, it's the intensity of grazing. So if you graze too hard, basically you're doing it for a commercial reason. You'll graze out all of the interest. So what we do on the reserve is we operate with much lower stocking densities in general, and that's the critical thing. It's called extensive grazing. And I mean, there are carbon issues all around the livestock agenda, but that's the big difference. Is we have a conservation objective, so we're trying to manage the grassland and manage the sward to maximise the ecological output. On some of these these decimated uplands, the sward is managed as hard as possible to maximise the sheep production. And you can walk round some of these upland areas. I walked round on a lovely summer day, Coniston Old Man. It was a beautiful day. I didn't see a single bumblebee. I hardly saw any flowers apart from really common flowers. And that is the contrast. It's about how you graze. So it's not sheep are bad or not bad.
Can I just follow that up saying that what I was listening to was that sheep are not native species to Britain, and so this has just popped into my head now, but I'm sure you're doing the best possible solution, but what about using cattle or ponies instead of sheep? I can see you're using them as well as sheep. Is there a reason for that, I wonder? Thank you.
Yeah, so what we're trying to balance is obviously there are commercial aspects we need to tangle. And in Sussex, sheep are a traditional animal on the downs. And again, you're right, sheep are not native. So if you go to somewhere like Knepp, where they are replicating natural processes, sheep is not one of the animals that there are at Knepp. But for us, it's not so much what animal we use. So whether it's native or non-native doesn't really matter. It's can that animal produce the right sward and habitat to maximise the nature conservation. And that's what the grazing team do. Their job is to try and move our animals between sites to try and get those optimum conditions for the wildlife, which is really tricky to do. Dan Ross, who is our land management director, who's there. Dan, I'm sure, could have a word with Dan afterwards. He knows the ins and outs of our grazing operation much better than me.
Just briefly as well, to contextualise this, sheep grazing. Yeah. Just to contextualise this, sheep grazing drives the richest habitat on a small scale in Europe. It's the action of sheep grazing which is driving that species diversity. So it's not a compromise. It's not something we're doing and hoping it'll work. It is the method of getting rich biodiversity. So that's how it works on the South Downs. It's different in other areas.
Hi, Dan Ross here. Just to add a couple of points to that. So the breeds of animals we're using, we're breeding and grazing with Sussex breed for the cattle, and we've worked so hard to improve the quality of those animals, and they're grazing extensively now across Sussex. And yes, we've got Herdwicks as well in terms of the Lake District breed, doing a really good job at trying to get that more rough pasture into that diversity of sward. And we're also breeding Romney sheep as well to get those sort of shorter swards as well. So a real variety there.
Good question. Other questions? Can we wait for the microphone down the front here in red? Oh, it's Mike, is it?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
No, that was a brilliant question.
Yeah.
Right, as an ex-member of staff and a potential member of the awkward squad, I just want to say congratulations to the Trust. You've come through some very hard times through the pandemic and everything, all the issues of that. And the work you did through the pandemic was just phenomenal, I thought. And as someone who started with the Trust with a membership of 5,000, to see it getting up for nearly 40,000 is just brilliant. So no question, Chris, this is just a congratulations to everyone involved. And as someone who's been involved in the trust all that time, I'm delighted to see how things are progressing.
Great, thank you very much, Mike.
One in the middle here.
It's quite hard to see here.
Yeah.
Hello, can you tell me about the Beaver project, please, and how that's going now?
Okay, Henry, I was going to say Henry's probably closest to that. I could make something, well, no, I wouldn't make something up, but it might be lacking in some important detail. Thank you, Henry.
So at the moment, it's only possible for beavers to be in a captive, in an enclosure, basically. It's a captive population. So in Sussex, there are currently 2 captive populations. We look forward to the results of the consultation that's recently taken place, which we hope will enable beavers to be free living in Sussex. But in the meantime, the Wildlife Trust hosts the Sussex Beaver Partnership, where we get together with other NGOs and key landowners and agencies to talk about some of the practical issues around beaver licensing, etc. in Sussex. And we get approached quite a lot by landowners who are keen to get licenses. So we, as much as we can, are working with those landowners that are really keen to just see, is it feasible? I mean, it's a big thing to take on a beaver license. I mean, the paperwork alone is enough to kind of make you think twice. But is it the right location, etc.? Have they thought about all of the ramifications and the liabilities, etc.? So I think really the big dream is free living populations in the future. But in the meantime, really fantastic to see the evidence coming from all over the place of the impact of beavers. And we just want to see more and more of them in Sussex. Amazing creatures.
Just if I can follow up with that, what can we have an idea of what is the problem with beavers and why they have to be contained? I know that when beavers were reintroduced at the beginning at Knepp, one of them died. Wasn't it found down the river or something? I wonder, why are beavers particularly a problem?
Thank you, Henry.
I think when beavers went extinct, we didn't have a vast network of roads and towns through our landscape, and because of the damming activity of beavers, there's a perception that they can't live possibly near an urban environment because they might cause flooding that might impact houses. The reality is, in locations where there are free living beavers, that's not happening in the slightest, and actually the beavers on the River Otter in Devon are bringing actual flood benefits to the local communities. But I think there's a kind of a reticence to kind of accept that. But the evidence is absolutely there that free living beavers can be a thing. And the River Otter trial, which the Devon Wildlife Trust have been an absolutely fundamental player in, is really bringing that evidence so that hopefully, fingers crossed, we can have them.
I think one of the barriers is often landowner fear, where you can, because of the activities of beavers, some landowners fear flooding of farmland, for example. So where you've got that perception and that fear, we need to go softly, I think, to create the confidence that beavers in the landscape is a good thing. And it definitely, slowing down the flow, reducing flood risk, are all proven benefits of beavers. So more of that, please.
I guess that we're 5 or 10 minutes over now, so unless there are any other questions, I think we shall move on. Thanks very much for those everybody. I'll now move on.
To a fantastic talk.
Yeah, much better talk. Thanks very much, Chris, and it gives me great pleasure now to introduce David Plummer, who I've also known for a very long time. He has been at Wildlife Trust for a long time while I was there. He was kind of just always there, doing photography, teaching photography courses. In fact, I think some of his photography courses were some of the best attended that we've had. So, fantastic, world-leading wildlife photographer, cameraman, film consultant, best-selling author, also does work at Knepp and does some excellent photography at the Knepp estate as well. Can I hand over to David Plummer? Thank you very much.
That's not ease of access, is it? So that brings up the first thing. I have to take lots of drugs for Parkinson's disease. They make me underwork, overwork, and they make me look drunk some of the time. And just to let you know, I'm not yet drunk. But I may be after this. So I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see my clicker, first of all. Now, I'm a little bit out of practice with COVID, giving public speeches. So I'm going to shirk all responsibility and throw all responsibility over to you to help me relax. The more oohs and ahs I get at nice images, the more relaxed I feel and the better the talk you get. So you are totally responsible for the success of this talk. So let's begin. You got the message. So I'm a wildlife photographer. I've moved into film and consultancy in areas like that. My job is, this talk is roughly talking about my job, my role. And it's interesting, all the questions that have just come up are all projects I've documented in the past, the Devon Beaver project and grazing on Knepp and areas like that. And so I was itching to sort of get in there, but I will just show you. Now, all the presentations we've had so far have been backed up by imagery. And that's my role, the imagery. And if we just move on to the next slide, this is how I spend most of my life. In a hide, something like that. Now, I remember when I started at Sussex Wildlife Trust, which was 2001, I had this hide, and this hide still exists. It's all mouse-eaten and got holes in it and rotten, but I still use it in the garden. Some of the things I've seen and documented from this hide have been truly wonderful on a personal level and important sometimes on a scientific level, and I think important on a communication level. Now, if I move on to the next one. So, that's brilliant. This is not a very good one. The reason I use this bird is probably not everyone in the room can identify this bird. Most of you probably can, but perhaps not 100%. My job as a wildlife photographer is not to photograph rare subjects. It's to photograph the familiar in a beautiful way. Because I would say 100% of the audience can recognise this bird. 100% of the European audience can probably recognise this bird. And this can carry a much greater message than just a shot of a marsh tit, which was the previous bird. Interestingly, on a depressing level, at my start at the Wildlife Trust 21 years ago, I was chatting to Mike and we talked about marsh tit. Marsh tit is now extinct as a breeding species on Woodsmill Reserve. Not throughout Sussex, but it is very, very much declining. And that's within my time just at the Wildlife Trust. So we're going to talk about conditions because this is a bit behind the scenes. This looks really bleak, sort of Svalbard, driving snow. It was actually in my garden and I had Wi-Fi contact and I was ferrying in cups of tea and coffee, so it wasn't too bad. Comfort in a hide is primary. And some of the things I get from my hide, that was just in the garden. This should go, it's not going. Ah, here it is. So I actually have now moved into film, and some of the things I've documented just in the garden. I think COVID has made everyone much more local. I mean, how often do we get snow like that in Sussex? So when we do, I'm out there to increase the portfolio. So there's images, and then we try and develop images and work with editors, because the whole meaning of my job is communication, and all art essentially is communication. So fairly standard image of a goldfinch doing what goldfinches do, sit on Niger seed feeders, which makes for a boring image, or on teasel, which is their more natural habitat. And then I develop images in order to get a greater portfolio. And very often I will work with editors in order to create banner space at the top and copy space down the side. So all the images you're seeing, none of them have been cropped, but they're all thought out. And this is a crucial part of photography. Again, this looks like I was up at dawn, which I was for this one, in really harsh conditions. This was actually photographed from my desk. And I just set up this teasel head just a few metres by the side of my pond. I was doing my emails and the cameras all there, set up, ready to go. And you just sprinkle a little bit of Niger seed on top of the teasel head and wait for the frost, and there you can go. And I still had a cup of tea at the same time. But even in the home scenario, I set up things, and I've moved into solving problems for film production companies. This is one of the things we had to capture. That's filmed by me, by the way, so more oohs and ahs. But look at the way it covets this acorn. Now, it looks really wild. That's actually on a table. And I just create a scenario that is conducive for the jay to do that. Luckily, last year there was no acorn crop, I think, across the whole of southern Britain. This year, there's a mast year, and I've not had a single jay in the garden. Last year, when I was being paid to get this stuff, they were coming in like crazy, about 50 times an hour to get acorns. So, life in a hide. This is your typical view in a hide. In the old days, before smartphones, you had to read a book or write notes and things like that. And to some degree, I miss that. But now you can keep up on your emails. And some hides are certainly more comfortable than others. But hides have to be thought out as far as getting your shot is concerned. Some are very low level. Some are very comfortable. So in some hides, you have to get there super early in order to, you don't disturb your prey, especially birds of prey. And so you get there pre-dawn and you've not had any breakfast and no sleep. And even in winter, you go wrapped up and you can get even more comfortable. But comfort in a hide is crucially important, because if you're not comfortable, you won't stay there very long. And if you don't stay there very long, you will not get your subject. So moving on in hide production, I've sort of become quite good at producing obscure hides. So this is a project I wanted to do on little grebes. And so I built a floating hide. There's me getting into it. It's essentially a floating platform. And here it is. You can just see my hand poking out the front there. This is actually Woods Mill Reserve. And I used to get there pre-dawn in my wetsuit for about 2 months years ago. The shots were taken by Amanda Reeves, the press officer, so they're not very good shots, but sorry, Amanda, you're not here. I know you're watching on YouTube. But they're the sorts of shots I can get using a floating hide. The whole goal of using a hide is you're invisible. And you can get in and document wildlife activity without disturbing the wildlife. And my goal is to get in and get out without disturbing it. So the BBC heard about this. So the One Show came down and asked me to make a sort of Mark II hide. They thought my little square one looked rubbish. So they wanted the one on the right, which I built. And I built it, it was a bit of a rush, so I had to build it really quickly. I wish I could work that fast now. There you go. And there it is on the water. It's actually got the narrator and cameraman inside. I'm actually just going to click on. This is a little excerpt from the one show, and it leads us on to the next part. It should start.
My suits and head out onto the water.
It's a whole different perspective being out here on the water. I feel like I'm in the swamplands of Louisiana, not Surrey. This is a pretty unusual way to start a day out photographing, but I'm intrigued to see how it's going to work.
I may look like a talking bush, but as I'm not casting a human silhouette, the bird shouldn't see me as a threat. At least, that's the plan.
What's great about this hide is I'm just not fixed in one position. I can just really easily swing around. Oh, crikey. I've got myself stuck. No. Oh. So I got my foot caught in between some branches. Now, there's a little duckling coming just in front of me here. I haven't reached the grebe yet, but the duckling could be an ideal opportunity to begin to get to grips with being in this hide. I'm completely covert. None of the birds seem to mind me being here. I feel like a spy on the lake. I can actually communicate with David using walkie-talkies.
Oh, hold on. What have I done? So that's an image I got of the same nest, which I actually think was better than his, but I had the luxury of time. But what's interesting is with wildlife documentaries is everyone watches Planet Earth, but everyone loves the last 10 minutes where they talk about how they do it. And this is what has been increasing in the media. And I get filmed quite a lot doing this now. And it has an important message. I think it's encouraging more people not just to enjoy nature, but get involved in it. Here's another shot of grebe. So this is all at Woodsmill Nature Reserve, Wildlife Trust Nature Reserve. So it's all there in front of you. Now, that being said, and on a nautical level, I'm going to transport us at high speed. Now, Chris, you were talking about going to this region. This is the sort of speed you will go at. There's me whacking the GoPro down really badly. So we're going to Brazil now, because the rubbish around here has been the weather around here has been so rubbish, I thought we'd go somewhere else. And this is my prey, jaguars. And I've now filmed and photographed 72 jaguars. And I've been working there since 1998. And I use them as black and white art images as well. And this image will have a bit more significance later on. But I do, it's behind the scenes, and this is a crucial slide because it shows at the end of the day the process when you're working on location. You've got your spare 2 camera bodies. You always take 2 camera bodies because if one breaks, you've got the other one. You don't want to be in Brazil without a camera if you're on a commission. You've got your GoPros, your computer, all your hard drives. Be aware, portable hard drives are not that portable. So back all your work up, because if you don't, it's about £800 to £1,000 to get all the recovery of a broken hard drive. But the most important piece of kit there is the crate of beer on the left-hand bottom corner. Now I have seemed to have followed the path of elusive animals. And that, I think, was to my detriment initially. But I think it's worked in my favour because I've developed a lot of fieldcraft skills in that time. Jaguar is a big cat, but this is Ocelot, is a much smaller cat. I've filmed 72 jaguars. I've probably seen about 8 Ocelot and filmed probably 2 of those in that time. And this is just waiting by some fishermen, where fishermen actually bring in their catch, and they would sort of cut all the guts and things out of their fish and just chuck the scraps to the side. And these ocelot became habituated to this. So although you can chase really, really wild animals, and I do only deal with wild animals, sometimes it's good to keep your ear to the ground and find out where animals are sort of habituated and showing different behaviour, and it means I can get in and get out without disturbing them. So coming back to home, I think somebody said about, I think Charles Darwin said about God, if he created the earth, he had an inordinate fondness for beetles. If I created the earth, it would be an inordinate fondness for owls. So this is Bramber Brooks, so it is very local. It's literally just upstream from here, and everyone loves an owl. It's great currency. Now, this is the gear I wear if I'm photographing, I don't go back, if I'm photographing barn owl or short-eared owl. That is me with the camera lens in front. You can see the Union Jack, so I don't get shot by the wrong side. But in this situation, I've had barn owl glide past me and land 1 metre away from me. As far as photography and filming is concerned, that is rubbish, because I can't even focus that close. As a personal experience, however, having a barn owl, and I can literally see the plumage rising and falling as it breathes, as a personal experience, it's incredible. And I think sooner or later, a barn owl will land on my head. But in this sort of gear, I'm pretty invisible. You feel really stupid, but no one can see you. And I used to actually, as people walk past, I've had people walk within 1 or 2 metres of me, and I used to say hello, and they would then jump out their skin. So now I don't do that so much, which has led to a few interesting scenarios with dogs or couples, but that's for another website and another talk. So other tricks of the trade behind the scenes, I use any little trick that will manipulate wild behaviour of animals. And for this one, I just use a radio-controlled MP3 player. And on it, I recorded the sound of my mouse squeaks. And I put that in an old sock and buried it in a tussock of grass. And then I got about 30 metres away back to my vehicle, got the camera ready and thought, this is the first time I've ever used this. Let's just test the range. Within 20 seconds of pressing play, a barn owl flew out of the wood and landed straight over the MP3 player. This is when I took the shot. It had directed its eyes from the MP3 player, which is down on the ground. In fact, it didn't direct its eyes, it directed its ears. And it then heard the camera click. But this is just any trick that doesn't hurt the bird or doesn't hurt my quarry that allows me to get film footage or the image is a great bonus to me. Now, one owl, and anyone that knows me here will know I'm totally obsessed with tawny owls. I'm currently filming a documentary about tawny owls, an independent documentary. And there are some things coming on television, maybe in the future, that were filmed in my garden using tawny owls. And they're our most common owl, but they are totally elusive. This is one of the most favourite images I've taken of tawny owl. It is a setup, I'll be honest with you. The branch wasn't there, the leaves weren't there, the mouse wasn't there, and the owl wasn't there. I put all those together. But this is all fieldcraft, and this is a wild owl. And so I just manipulate its behaviour in order to create a win-win situation that will not harm the owl in any way or disturb their natural behaviour. This is one of the shots of my life, and I call this the last view small mammals get. If they're lucky. And so, yeah, this is just tawny owl coming in for the kill. Anyone who has the idea that owls are intelligent, reflective, as per our sort of iconography of owls, once you start working with owls, you realise they're pretty stupid, but they are simple computers. But their form and function is absolutely incredibly evolved just to kill, and that I call tawny owls the killer angels. So as far as solving filming problems and behind the scenes problems, with my passion for owls, a colleague of mine, Istvan, called me from Hungary, and he said, I've got a pair of Scops owls that have moved into a Eurasian roller nest box, which is that thing there. It looks like a big blue tip box in the middle of nowhere. And he was really annoyed because he's doing this Eurasian roller project, and he's got 2 Scops owls in there. So we're trying to develop ecotourism in the national park, Kishkunsag National Park. And so he called me and said, you know, what can we do? So I went out there on the first night, parked my car, and I thought, well, we'll put that stick there and hopefully the owls will land on there and we'll start getting some images. And I was there 4 hours and got absolute rubbish. I got Scops owl on blue tip box, which was really rubbish. Now, this is what it's all about. You then come away, you need to be inspirationally dissatisfied with photography and filmmaking. It's not a case of giving up. It's a case of how can I change this so it works? Very simple in this case. I just got strips of bark, and while the owls are dormant inside the box, I super glued them onto the front of the box. Super glue so I can just push it on and just hold it there until it bonds. And we just super glued it, and I moved the camera around to the other side and put a raking light on it, and the next 2 images I got within 20 minutes. That's the first one. So just by getting that side perspective and using a raking light with bark on there, makes you think it's a tree. And then within 20 minutes, I got this image as well. And I think that just sums up the essence of wildlife photography. It's not serendipitous. It's not about going out and just happenstance. It's all about planning and tweaking. So moving on with owls, if you haven't got bored with them already, long-eared owl is very, very difficult to photograph in the UK. However, in Central Europe, they've got very, very different habits. So with Istvan again, who had no respect for the Soviet occupation of Hungary, or the Soviet era in Hungary, we found a load of long-eared owls roosting in trees outside an old Soviet military barracks. So he just kicked the doors down, because there were no Soviet soldiers inside anymore, kicked the doors down, pulled the window frames off, and he was literally just yanking them off. And we could photograph the owls right up at the same level, which is the optimum viewpoint to be. Other people heard about what we were doing in the town, and they said, well, I've got one outside my apartment. And so we were being inundated with invites to go to people's flats because they had their owl. You know, we have our robins, don't we, and our blue tits. These villagers had their owls. Once I got the geraniums out the way, and we could get stunning shots like this at the same level. To get this in the UK is pretty much impossible. Now, one thing another fascination with me is kingfishers. Excuse me, this is a female kingfisher, preening, obviously. And I've got a hide at NEP for kingfishers. And the BBC One show, again, heard about what I did with kingfishers. So they came down to film. And I'm just going to show you with the next bit how we use the kingfisher. Let's go. I shouldn't start.
My name is David Plummer, and I am very fortunate to be a professional wildlife photographer.
So we're going to ignore this because it started in the wrong place. So another area I work in is time-lapse photography. The good thing about time-lapse photography and my sort of condition at the moment is I can stay in one place. I set up multiple cameras, and this is a thing anyone can do on their mobile phone now. Hopefully this will play, and hopefully the music will play, because it's pretty good music as well. Hold on. So that was used as the credit sequence of a BBC documentary about lions. Thank you, music. And for your information, that comprised over 30,000 images, which are put, oh no, it's going to start again, which are all put together and played at a different speed, at 24 frames a second. So you see long changes in skies, etc., in real time. It's a very, very powerful way of showing time passing in film, and it's become a real passion of mine. So that was in Africa, and so we're going to land in Africa now. And this is the sort of landscape. This is Masai Mara. Unfortunately, I'm going to be back there in February. And this is my driver and friend, Charles, and we've worked together for probably 12 years now, pre-COVID, and we work together really well. That's the sort of vehicles we use. I'll show you the chaos inside. But the vehicle is completely open at the side, so lions do not view you as prey inside the lines of a vehicle, which is the thought to cling to when lions are right next to you and there's no sides to the vehicle. And inside, again, here's the chaos, 2 camera bodies, a bag of gubbins, fleeces, waterproofs, because everyone thinks everything's magical in the Masai Mara. It's damn cold in the morning. I've had frost on the grass in the morning, and then it's sort of 38 degrees at midday. So the range is huge. You've got fleeces, waterproofs, and I often say that wildlife photography is 15% photography and 85% everything else. And that 85% is the whole logistics to get everything right. And now just in case you were looking there's a leopard there. We live in the age of social media, and social media, love it or hate it, it's not good or bad, it's how we use it. It is a tool that we can use in conservation to get a message across. Certainly the government use it, so I think we can use it to our advantages as well. And so while I'm away, I can always social media things like this. and put a little ad for Nikon in there as well. But here's the sort of shots we go for. Now, to get this sort of shot, I was actually under the vehicle, because it gives me that very, very low viewpoint, which I have done with lions as well before, which is a little bit chilling because you're no longer inside the vehicle, but you have a blanket over you. Sadly, this, that's the only protection, a blanket. I feel like Harry Potter. Sadly, this leopard, Fig, I call her the $1 billion cat because she's probably earned the Masai Mara around that sum in ecotourism. And it does prove that what pays stays. She was a great mother, reared many leopard cubs, but sadly I heard earlier this year she was killed and eaten by lions. That's the reality of nature. It's not cruel, it's not brutal, it's just a process. And as far as the lions were concerned, she was just something that would drain their resources. And that's sometimes difficult to reconcile yourself with, and I do find myself behind camera very detached. This is another shot of my life, one that I've always strived to get, and that's cheetah at full chase, full speed, all feet in the air. And to do this, I had a group of tourists with me, and we were trailing two male cheetahs with gorgeous sunrise behind them. And my thoughts were, I want a little bit more. And with agreement with Charles and near mutiny in the vehicle, as we drove a mile around to get the other side of a trail of wildebeest, because our thought and a field craft means you start predicting what the wildlife is beginning to do. The more wildlife you deal with, the more you begin to predict. And we felt they were going to hunt. That's the only reason they were striving so purposefully. And so we drove to the other side, and Charles, a Maasai, a lot more experience than me with the cats there, he actually pointed to the very wildebeest they were going to go for. And as we moved the vehicle, it was dialing the settings in the camera. As soon as we got the other side, all hell broke loose. And I sprayed and prayed 25 frames of this cheetah as it arced around and eventually just killed the wildebeest right in front of me. I've got all the shots of the kill, which I won't share with you just before lunch. But I think this image I absolutely love because it shows that determination and focus on the cat itself. When it rains in the Masai Mara, a lot of tourists just go home or go back to camp. They think, oh, this is horrible. Lions especially, I know it's not a lion, but lions especially look grumpy at the best of times. So when it pours with rain, it's a great opportunity to give them a reason to look grumpy. And it also adds elements into the image, such as this streaking rain. And it sort of adds to the sort of fragility of the subject, because a cheetah will not go under bushes, because if it goes under bushes, it's at great risk of being ambushed by a leopard or a lion or even a buffalo. So here is another shot that I particularly like, that moment just pre-kill. It's a bit of a cheat, this one, because this was actually where the mother cheetah brought in a young impala fawn, having chased off the mother, and it brought the fawn in for its cubs to play with. Now, that was a brutal thing to watch for an hour, but I'm there to do a job, and these images sometimes communicate things. And they played with this fawn for an hour, chasing it around, pretending actually jumping on it, and the poor fawn was being licked, stroked, waxed down with their paws. And then all of a sudden, after an hour of playing with it, and they were actually laying on it and licking it. and the poor fawn didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, it changed, and about all 5 cubs just circled it and just consumed it, which again I won't show you in the interest of lunch, but it does allow me to get these sorts of images. I have heard that another wildlife photographer say that it's the 3 Fs, which are the sort of stimulants to get, stimulants, maybe the wrong word, the right lead-in to get wildlife images. And one of those is fornication, which could be another F, food and fighting. And in this situation, we had 2 lions that were part of a coalition to take over tenureship of a pride of lions. And they were a coalition, so they were probably 2 brothers, but the coalition was falling apart, and we were trailing them for several days, knowing a big fight was going to occur. And it did. But the trouble is, it was really loud, it was really aggressive, lots of damage, but it was in those bushes. So it was like, you remember the scene in Jurassic Park when the T-Rex comes in and takes the goat. You don't actually see it happening, just see all the bushes moving around. But this goes to prove the next image says a lot more, and this is the thing about stills photography. You've got to move your audience, and it tells a lot more of the story than that. This was the winner, and it shows how brutal their lives are, but the stills image has got to carry the message, and that's all part of the communication. I waited, I think, 5 hours for this shot in the heat of the Masai Mara. Once a lion moves her cubs, or starts moving her cubs, she won't stop. She'll just keep moving them. But she may wait 3 or 4 hours in between each movement. So consequently, you just wait on that route and hope for the best. But I think this again sums up the brutality of the environment, the harshness, but also a tenderness to it. Now, I did have a conversation about technology with a couple of people outside, actually. And when I started at the Wildlife Trust, I was on transparency film. If anyone knows about film speed, I was at ISO 50. Now I use cameras that go up to ISO 2 million, which allows me to get super low light images of high speed action. And this is Fig, that same leopard with her cub, running around at dusk. And it would have been a thing 20 years ago that I wouldn't have got an image of. But I didn't even know what was going on. It was just spraying and praying again at 14 frames a second. But it gives you a chance to get really spectacular images. And I've chosen to embrace the technology. It's not all about action. This is actually one of my most enduring images of leopard. And again, I had a group with me, but it was a leopard locally known as Shy Boy. Because it was like this all the time, it would stay out of the range of cameras. Fig, she was all over the place when a camera came out. She was a real performer, but Shy Boy definitely wasn't. But I noticed every time someone moved in the vehicle, he would look up and peek through. And in about 3 hours, I fired 5 frames, and they're all like this. But this is the leopard image that has endured most out of all my leopard images. So, it's a shot of me. But one thing I just want to make a mention of before I move on to a story and bring this to a conclusion is I've been with the Trust 21 years now as a volunteer. And she's not here, but I do want to say a thank you to Amanda Solomon, or Amanda Reeves, as she's now known, because at the beginning, when I was struggling, she invited me in with my sheets of transparencies, and she liked the work I did, and she encouraged me and helped me, and we've worked together. And we even did a little bit for Channel 5 News a couple of months ago. It's been uneasy at times when you've got 2 people with strong opinions. but Amanda still works at the Trust. And I know she's probably watching this on YouTube, but I'd like to say a huge thank you to her, because I was struggling then, and things are better now. And I'm going to show you a little story now to bring it to a conclusion. So I decided after a few years, I had an idea. Took me a few years to have an idea, to achieve something finally. A book, which resulted in 1 year of sorting through images, writing captions, approaching editors, publishers, anything. If anyone's tried to get a book published, good luck. And there's no money in it. But it's a work of passion. You want to be out there. And eventually a publisher picked up on this idea, but we had to crowdfund it. And it was luckily the fastest crowdfunded book in the UK. In the world, actually, I think, at the time. But it involved all the proof checks, etc., etc. I didn't know, if you knew how big a task it was, you wouldn't undertake it. But it was very gratifying when all of a sudden the publishers send all the books over to you to be signed. And my publisher was Penguin Random House. And I was like, my God, the biggest in the world. Now, you think it's glamorous signing books, because it always is in the films. You're in a warehouse, on your own, with a cup of coffee, just signing your name about 300 times. So I thought I'd made it to the extent that I could now afford a strawberry in my glass of champagne. So the BBC heard about this again. And so I was invited to Media City. If anyone's been there, it's like Blade Runner, only tidy. And I was invited on BBC Breakfast but before I went on, I had to have hair and makeup done. But I do notice they gave me a leopard skin apron. So I was on BBC Breakfast with Nagamin Shetty, and I don't remember his name, strangely enough. And in this image, I think Naga took a bit of a shine to me, because I think we're sort of touching hands behind his back. But I still see him and still don't know his name. But as a result of this, on Amazon, we got a call, and Penguin told us to look at the rankings on Amazon, and the book had gone to #1 bestseller on Amazon for wild animals. And so we thought, wow, we made #1 bestseller in a category. And then 20 minutes later, we got another call from Penguin Random House, and they said, check it again. And this was the screenshot that I managed to grab. It's the screenshot of my life, and it's on my toilet wall downstairs, so that every day I can contemplate the high point of life. And I was #1 bestseller, above John le Carré and Dan Brown. I think it was #1 bestseller for 5 minutes. But if you're #1 bestseller, you can say it for the rest of your life. But moving on, at that note, I just want to say thank you to Sussex Wildlife Trust, because it's the Trust's trust in me and the encouragement from Sussex Wildlife Trust through 21 years that has led me on to achieve lots and lots more. And consequently, I still work with the Wildlife Trust, and how crucially important it is, the Wildlife Trust, on a local level as well as on a wider level. I think it's so important, no matter what stage of career you're in, it still has to come back to local. And it's thanks to all the members and all the trustees and the staff, some of which I've known Henry for 21 years, Mike 21 years, Tony 21 years. And the trust has been through good and bad in those years, but it's always pervaded, it's always stood fast. And I just want to end this by saying a huge thank you to Sussex Wildlife Trust. Thank you.
of good pictures there, weren't there? Yeah, excellent. Well, I mean, we can have a couple of questions, a couple of thoughts, if there's anybody wants to ask anything or make any points.
Excellent, thank you.
Go on, put him under pressure. We got him for a while.
I'm sure I'm not alone in thanking you for a superb presentation.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask, how far back do you recall as a child or even an infant when you became triggered into an affection for wildlife?
My earliest memory is playing with woodlice on my parents' coffee table. About 2, 3, so about 20 years ago. No, that was my earliest memory. So I've always been, I could live the rest of my life without taking another single image. I could not live my life a single day without seeing wildlife. And the wildlife is the core. And I think all development, that we're all talking about these changes in government and changes in policy. I think my strong belief is all development and progression in our economy should continue within a functioning ecosystem.
Excellent. Any other thoughts, comments?
Oh, Rich, no.
Be gentle.
Thank you. Brilliant talk. This will be well, maybe a challenging question. We'll see. In this age of Instagram imagery and sort of all-pervading access virtually to nature and everything else, do you think people are getting more or less connected with nature?
Good question. It is the battlefield that exists, and we can't change that. We can only use it to our advantage. And our goal is to use it to make people more connected. I think COVID itself connected more people with nature, especially on a local level. All of a sudden, everyone was obsessed with birdsong because they could hear it for the first time. And everyone became very local in their gardens or in their local area. So my view is neither nor. It is a tool which we have to use to best advantage our cause, which is to connect more and more people with the natural world.
Great stuff. Thank you. Anybody else? Well, with that, I think I'll just say very big thank you. That's fantastic, as you've heard. Great, thanks very much indeed. That was fantastic. Almost as good as Chris's, but... Yes. Right, we're nearly at an end now. Normally at this stage, we have an award to give, the David Streeter Award. And unfortunately this year, we didn't get any nominations. And I think that it's not that there's nobody out there who actually... this is an award for young people between, what was the ages, 11 and 25, who offered something really good in the year for nature conservation, the David Streeter Award. So normally we make an award once a year to some fantastic project that young people have done. This year, unfortunately, there's been no nominations. And I think that's probably our fault. I don't think we managed to get out there asking for nominations. It's one of those things we didn't manage to achieve this year. We'll be doing it next year, so we'll be redoubling our effort to make sure this award isn't well known, because it really is something that ought to get out there. We really want to acknowledge the good work that's being done. Bouncing that back a bit, if you know people, young people, who are doing something fantastic, please do encourage them to apply. I think it'll probably be advertised on our website or something. There'll be a way to actually get in touch. So if you know young people who've done fantastic projects, we know there are thousands out there. Please encourage them to apply. So thank you very much. And I think, looking at my team, have I forgotten anything? Is that about it? I think we're done, and we're actually on time, which is not bad for me. So I think with that, next year we'll be meeting an AGM at roughly the same sort of time in the month. So hopefully we'll see you all again next year. And that's it for today. Please carry on purchasing stuff at the merchandise stall. And I think there's enough lunch for everybody. Thanks very much for coming. Thank you.